Good morning, class 10. After the completion of the reflex section and the reflex arc, now we move on to the next topic, that is eye. As you know, we've got 5 sense organs which gives information to our body about whatever changes that is taking place in the surrounding. These informations are analyzed by our central nervous system and interpreted so that our body can make necessary changes, necessary arrangement towards whatever information that has come. There are 5 sense organs: eye, ear, nose, tongue and skin. We'll be discussing about eye today. Eye as the sense organs. This is the organ of vision. Eye the organ of vision. That means eye helps us to see. Eye helps us to see because eye has photosensitive receptors. Photosensitive means they are stimulated in the presence of light. So these receptors, photosensitive receptors, help to detect different wavelengths of light. Whatever visual information, interpretation is to be made, it is on the basis of the stimulation of these photosensitive receptors. Now we come to the location of the eye. Eye is located in our head region, in the skull. In the skull, we have 2 openings called the orbits. These orbits are the position where the eyes are located. Now, eye is a very delicate organ. It is a fluid-filled organ. It is a very delicate organ, so it needs to be protected. To place them directly on the bony skull would be too risky. So, what happens is, this eye is protected by a pad of fat. There is a pad of fat on which the eye is placed. There is a pad of fat. Eye is structurally, we can say eye is almost spherical in structure. It is almost spherical in structure, approximately 2.5 centimeter in diameter. It is fluid filled and it has number of eye coats. We'll be discussing about when we talk about the structure. And the optic nerve formation is brought by the optic nerve, is interpreted, and likewise stimulations are created. Now the function of the eye. Function of the eye. Function of the eye. The first and the foremost function of the eye is to see. It helps us to see the different shapes and sizes approximately. We can approximately decide on the size of the object. We can only make approximate estimates, but it helps us to see the shape and the size. Because of the presence of various photosensitive cells, we can make visual interpretation as well, color interpretation as well. Color perception is another important feature of the eye. Eye helps us to estimate the distance. It helps us to estimate the distance. We cannot actually say this is this feet or this meter long, but we can estimate. And another important property of the eye, it also helps us to see the depth. Depth means if you place a chair next to the wall, this eye can decide and say that there is a gap between the chair and the wall. Another important feature of the eye is it helps us to visualize depth, especially when you are walking on steps. If you are not able to visualize depth, then we would fall down. Another important function of the eye is it helps us to see 3D vision. 3D vision, that means it has both length, breadth and height. It has all three-dimensional images can be seen with the help of the eye. Eye helps us to see in dim light as well as in bright light. And visual reflexes, like something comes close to the eye, we have a visual reflex by which we can close our eyes, and all these is possible because eye is very close to the brain. That is why in the case of visual reflexes, it is the brain that controls. Now we move on with the different parts of the eye. For this we'll have to draw the diagram. I'll go step by step. Just above the eye, which protects the eye from whatever fluid that might enter into the eye and cause irritation. Then we have the eyelashes, eyelid with eyelashes. This also protects the eye. The eyelashes also protects the eye. It does not allow small objects to enter into the eye. The eyelid continuously blink. It has two functions. It protects the eye, and the other important function, it helps to spread the tear, the lacrimal secretion produced by the tear gland, the lacrimal gland, all over the eye, because eye is an exposed part of the body. It is exposed externally. It has only a thin protective layers which protects the eye. That is why it needs added protections. The tear that is produced by the tear gland, or it is also called the lacrimal gland, produces tear which flows into the eye, in front of the eye, and the function of the eyelid is to spread this tear in front of the eye. Now we move on to the actual parts of the eye. Eye, as we have already talked about, is almost spherical in structure. It is almost spherical in structure. It is made up of number of layers. The first layer is called the sclera, which we see it as the white part of the eye. The white part of the eye is the sclera. But this sclera, which is opaque, in front of the eye, but in the front portion, the white part of the eye is called the sclera. But sclera in the exposed part of the eye in front is transparent. This is opaque, the sclera is opaque, but in front here it is transparent. This is called the cornea. Cornea is transparent. The first layer of the eye, in front it is called the cornea, which is transparent, and the sclera, which is opaque. I'm sure you understand. Opaque does not allow light to pass through, and transparent is the one which allows light to pass through. Because this is a photosensitive organ, light has to enter, so that is why in front the cornea is transparent. Just below the eyelid and the cornea and the sclera in front, we have another protective layer which is called the conjunctiva. This is another thin transparent layer which protects the eye. Normally when we suffer from red eye, it is this layer which is infected by bacteria. Okay, that is why it is called the conjunctivitis. Now The next layer below this is the choroid. This choroid is another second layer which is black in color. This is black to avoid unnecessary reflection of light when the light enters into the eye. This choroid is richly supplied with blood vessels because eye is also a living structure. It requires supply of nutrients and oxygen. So this is the choroid which is richly supplied with blood vessels which does the necessary work. This is called the choroid. The second layer is the choroid. Now the third and the most important layer as far as vision is concerned is called the retina. Retina is the photosensitive layer, which is the third and the most important layer. In the retina, you'll see a small depression where there is maximum concentration of rods and bones. This is called the fovea, or it is also called yellow spot. Fovea or the yellow spot. And this structure continues as the optic nerve. The region here, whenever an image falls on this particular region, it is not visible. That is why this particular region is called the blind spot. It's called the blind spot. Fovea or yellow spot, this is called the blind spot. And the most important layer as far as vision is concerned is the retina. And whatever information is stimulated on the retina by the photo light that enters, this is passed on to the optic nerve, through the optic nerve to the visual centers of the brain. Now, the entire eyeball is divided into two chambers. We have a biconvex lens, ciliary body. Then in front of the lens we have a structure which controls the entry and exit of light into the eye. This is called the iris. Which controls the entry and exit of light into the eye. Then at the center of the eye we have the pupil. The size of the pupil is controlled by the iris, and it is through this the light actually enters into the eye. Now we see there are two chambers. The chamber which is larger chamber is called the vitreous humor, which helps to maintain the shape of the eyeball. And in front of the lens we have another chamber. This is a slightly denser fluid. The vitreous humor is slightly denser fluid. The fluid in front of the lens is slightly transparent. This is called the aqueous humor. Then another structure that is present here, which helps to keep the lens in place, is called the suspensory ligament. The function of the suspensory ligament is to keep the the lens of the eye in place. The lens is biconvex. So this is basically the structure of the eye and the various functions associated with it. Now we move on to the other important portion, that is, what are the abilities of the eye? Now in the case of human beings, eye gives us stereo or binocular vision. Because of this binocular vision, we get 3D objects, 3D images. 3D images, that means height, breadth and depth as well. Height, breadth and length, all the three-dimensional images can be seen because of this binocular vision. We have two eyes placed in such a way. Now, to understand the difference between a monovision and a binocular vision, what we can do is close one of our eye and look at the objects placed close to the wall. You will see the object in front of the wall is almost plastered on the wall when you see with only one eye. But if you see the same object with both the eyes, we'll get an impression that there exists a gap between the wall and that particular object. So binocular vision helps us to see 3D images. Another important feature of the eye is accommodation. Accommodation. As we know, eye is almost like a photographic camera. The principle and the structure is almost the same. But the only difference is when we use a camera, a professional camera, we'll have to adjust the focal length. But our eye does not have to do that. This is what is known as accommodation. That means we can see near and distant objects both at the same time. Like you're walking on the road, on a footpath, you can see the tower clock, the watch on the tower clock, and we can see the watch on our wrist as well, both at the same time. We can see like this and we can see our wristwatch as well, both at the same time. This is what is known as accommodation, the power of the eye to see near and distant object both at the same time. This is important feature of the eye, accommodation, because the lens can become flat and fat and thin within a very short period of time. But as the aging process goes on, because of the aging, this particular ability is lost, and then we suffer from various defects of the eye. Next we discuss is the defect of the eye. Is it clear, boys? The structure of the eye. You can follow your books as well, and you can read defects of the eye. The first defect we talk about here is myopia. Myopia is also commonly known as short-sightedness. This is also known as short-sightedness. That means in this particular case, the eye can see near objects clearly, but it fails to see the distant object. It fails to see distant objects. It can see clearly the near objects. A person can read or write comfortably, but the distant objects are not visible to the eye. The reason could be the eyeball becomes too long. The eyeball becomes too long. As we have already talked about, the vitreous humor and the aqueous humor maintains the shape of the eyeball. That is why the shape of the eyeball has to be maintained. If there is any change in the shape of the eyeball, then it leads to number of defects. So, In this particular case, the eyeball becomes too long, because of which the retina is pushed back. The retina is pushed back. That is why the image should have formed on the retina. Now, because when the eyeball becomes too long, the retina is pushed back and the image is formed before the retina. The important feature here you need to remember is the image is formed before the retina. So by the time the light reaches the retina, it is blurred, because of which the vision is not clear. This is called myopia or short-sightedness. So myopia or short-sightedness is the condition when a person can see close objects, he can read or write comfortably, but the person cannot see distant objects. Now, how are we going to correct this? To correct this, we use a biconcave lens. Just to let you understand, this is the lens, this is the retina. Okay? The lens and the retina. Lens and the retina. Now, the light enters into the through the lens and it is converged by the lens, the biconvex lens, but it falls before the retina. So to correct this, what we do is we use a biconcave lens. Biconcave lens allows the light to diverge before it enters into the lens. And after this divergence, now the light falls exactly on the retina, because of which we get a clear picture. The power here that we talk about is the minus power. I have left an important portion, that is the cells that are present on the retina. I'll finish this correction, then I'll come to that. Okay? And the different cells that are present on the photosensitive cells that is present on the retina. I missed that out, I'll come to that after I finish the correction. So here, in the case of myopia, we use a biconcave lens to correct this. Biconcave lens diverges the light before it enters into the biconvex lens, and after that the light exactly falls on the retina. This is minus power. When we use concave lens, then it is minus power. When we use convex lens, then it is plus power. This is the case of myopia. Now let's go on to the next, that is hypermetropia or hyperopia. Hyperopia or hypermetropia, or this is also called long-sightedness. So like the name suggests, here a person can see distant objects very clearly, but he fails to read and write. He cannot see near objects. He can see distant objects, but he cannot see near objects. Now what happens here in this particular case is, it's like this. This is the retina. Now light, after passing through the convex lens, the light meets beyond the retina. The light meets beyond the retina. This is a condition when the eyeball becomes short. Eyeball becomes short. That means again the eye loses its shape, because of which the retina is pushed forward and the image is formed beyond the retina. This is a condition where the image is very blurred, because before it meets, it falls on the retina. So the image is blurred. The eyeball becomes short. Now how to correct this? To correct this, what happens? Before the light enters, a convex lens is used. Artificial convex lens is used. This convex lens converges the light before it actually enters into the lens of the eye. And after this, the light is exactly converged on the retina. So here, the biconvex lens is used, and the function of the biconvex lens is to converge the light before it falls on the lens of the eye. And after that, the further convergence by the biconvex lens of the eye, the light falls exactly on the retina and the vision becomes clear. This is the plus power. When biconcave lens is used, then it is minus power. When biconvex lens is used, it is plus power. So this is hypermetropia or long-sightedness. Now let's carry on with the other two defects, that is presbyopia . Presbyopia is a condition when a person becomes old. That is above the age of, it is due to aging process, above the age of 40. The person fails to see the near objects after a certain age. Why does this happen is because the lens loses the elasticity. The lens needs to be flexible. It has to be fat when we see close objects and thin when we see a distant object. But here the lens cannot become fat enough, because the ciliary muscles also have become weak, because of which a condition like hypermetropia occurs here. This is called the presbyopia. This is called presbyopia because it is not due to the shape of the eyeball, but due to the loss of elasticity of the lens. The condition is same and as the hypermetropia. That is why this is also corrected by using biconvex lens. Now the last of the defect is the cataract. Cataract is a condition when the lens loses its transparency. The lens becomes opaque due to excessive deposition of certain substances. Like in the case of diabetes, there is a lot of deposition of sugar in the lens, because of which the lens loses its transparency and it becomes opaque, so it does not allow the light to enter. This normally occurs after the age of 40 and in the conditions like clinical conditions like obesity, that means a person becomes too fat, diabetes, consumption of excess alcohol, and smoking causes the loss of transparency of the lens. Now in this particular case, the only method that can be used to correct it is surgery. By surgery, the natural lens is removed, the defective lens is removed, and an intraocular lens is placed, which helps us to restore the vision, or in modern cases, it is called phacoemulsification. The phacoemulsification. Normally it is also called as phaco. So these are the defects and the corrections of the eye. Now let me just go through the first part that I have missed, that is the retina. In the case of retina, the fovea or the yellow spot that we talked about consists, now the lens, the retina of the eye consists of two types of cells, the rod cells and cone cells. The rod cells is for black and white vision, and it also helps us to see in dim light. That is the function of the rod cells. It helps us to see in dim light. Now, when we suffer from night blindness, it is the defect of the rod cells, because the rod cells have a pigment called rhodopsin, with the help of which it is able to, which helps us to see in dim light. So, black and white vision and dim light. Now, cone cells helps us to see colored vision as well as bright light vision. The cone cells are specialized cells which helps us to see color and bright light, and also helps us to see in bright light. Now this fovea is a point where there is large concentration of the cone cells. That is why whatever image falls on the fovea is the brightest and the clearest image. And whatever image falls on the blind spot, we have also talked about the blind spot, is not visible to the eye. So that is about the structure and the functions of the eye. We'll talk about locomotion in the next class.